A federal agent in Oklahoma watched a home router in a stranger's living room become a getaway car. Not a darknet server, not a hidden bunker, a blinking Wi-Fi box next to somebody's TV. That is what made the 2026 SocksEscort takedown so unsettling. According to the FBI and DOJ, this network was built from hacked routers and IoT devices in 163 countries. Then, those connections were allegedly rented out so other criminals could hide behind ordinary families, small offices, and forgotten modems. This case matters because it flips the usual cybercrime image upside down. The crime scene was not only on a criminal's laptop, it was also in kitchens, bedrooms, and back offices owned by people who had no idea they were part of it. And what impresses me most here is how quiet that transformation was. No skull on the screen, no ransom note. Just normal internet lights blinking like always. The operation was called SocksEscort. U.S. authorities announced the disruption in May 2026. Court records say the botnet infected end-of-life routers, compromised them, and turned them into proxy services. In plain English, a proxy is a digital middleman. It makes your traffic appear to come from somewhere else. So if a fraudster in one country wanted to log into a victim's bank account, send phishing emails, or mask suspicious activity, this network could make that traffic look like it came from an ordinary home connection instead. And that detail changes the whole emotional weight of the story, because the victims were not just targets of intrusion. Their own internet connections became alibis for somebody else's crimes. Curious. Investigators said the network had been operating at global scale, quietly selling access to compromised devices. The DOJ described the infrastructure as a criminal proxy service. Security researchers have warned for years that residential proxies are valuable because traffic from homes looks more trustworthy than traffic from a cloud server or an obvious anonymizing service. A bank may flag a server farm. A retailer may question traffic from a known VPN exit node. But a suburban cable modem in Ohio? Or a home router in Brazil? That can look ordinary, harmless, human. And when I read the case materials, that was the part that stuck with me. We spend so much time picturing cybercrime as something distant and exotic. Then a case like this shows the disguise may be sitting under a family photo, collecting dust near a wall outlet. So let me ask you this. If your router was secretly used as cover for ransomware or account theft, who carries more blame here? The criminal who built the network, or the manufacturers and users who left millions of aging devices exposed? Tell me in the comments. To understand how this worked, you have to forget the movie version of hacking for a minute. This was less like smashing a window and more like stealing thousands of unused license plates. Old routers, forgotten admin panels, end-of-life gear that no longer received patches, devices people install once, then stop thinking about for 5 years, maybe longer. According to the FBI affidavit and public statements, the network relied on compromised routers and internet-connected devices. Authorities said these devices were then enrolled into a botnet and offered as SOCKS proxy nodes. That last term sounds technical, so keep it simple. It meant outsiders could route traffic through your device and borrow your internet identity. Not your name exactly, your location, your reputation, your IP address. That is why calling this just a botnet almost undersells it. A botnet usually makes people think of spam or denial of service traffic. This was closer to invisibility infrastructure, a criminal utility. Rent the mask, use it, move on. Already you can feel the investigative problem, right? If malicious traffic points back to a grandma's router in a quiet neighborhood, how many cases begin in the wrong place? How many alerts burn time on the wrong suspect? How many victims never even learn that their connection was used as a digital false face? Urgent. Federal investigators began tracing the infrastructure, and in May 2026, the Department of Justice announced a coordinated disruption. The public details focused on the seizure and neutralization of the Proxy network, with the FBI's Oklahoma City field office highlighted in the announcement. Court-authorized actions targeted the command and control structure and the compromised devices that formed the service. That is a crucial distinction. Authorities were not just chasing one hacker at one keyboard. They were trying to dismantle a market built on other people's hardware. This is where the story gets bigger than one case file. Residential proxy networks have become useful to fraud crews, credential stuffing operations, ad fraud actors, and ransomware affiliates because they reduce friction. They make malicious traffic blend in with ordinary life. The digital equivalent of walking through a crowd wearing someone else's coat. And there is something deeply unfair about that. The homeowner pays for the electricity. The homeowner pays for the internet service. The homeowner leaves with the security risk. Somebody else rents the benefit. Engaged. Picture the human scale of it. A teacher grading papers on a laptop. A retired couple streaming a movie. A small dentist's office locking up for the night. In the background, their router is helping a stranger hide an intrusion somewhere else in the world. They do not hear it. They do not approve it. They don't even know they are in the chain. That is the real horror in this case. Not flashy malware graphics, not hacker mythology. Consent was removed from the equation, and ordinary internet users were turned into cover traffic. If that detail hit you as hard as it hit me when I read the DOJ announcement, leave a like. Cases like this deserve attention because the victim doesn't always look like a victim at first. Curious? There is also a lesson here about security culture. We treat routers like appliances, not computers. A refrigerator, a lamp, a cable box. Plug it in, forget it, replace it only when it dies. But these boxes sit at the edge of our digital lives. They see everything entering and leaving the house. So why do we ignore them until the Wi-Fi drops? And in my view, that is one of the most important takeaways from the SocksEscort case. The weakest point in a lot of cyber incidents is not the dramatic zero day people love to talk about. It is neglected infrastructure, boring hardware, the device nobody thinks is part of the story until prosecutors say it was. But here is the twist that makes this case darker. The hacked router was not even the final objective. It was the disguise. The network's value was not only that it compromised devices, its value was that it could be sold to other criminals. Fraud crews, account thieves, intrusion actors who needed clean-looking residential traffic. So the real product was not malware. It was plausible deniability. Think about that for a second. If an investigator sees suspicious logins coming from a home network, the first layer of truth may be completely wrong. The traffic may belong to a person thousands of miles away, renting somebody else's connection by the hour. That means the victim is also on paper the scene of the crime. If you like understanding cybercrime at this deeper layer, not just what was hacked, but how the whole criminal economy works behind it, subscribe. I cover cases like this every week. The DOJ said the operation reached devices in 163 countries. That number matters, not just because it sounds large, but because it shows scale in a way your brain can actually picture. 1 country is a local outbreak. 10 is an international campaign. 163 is a utility spread across the planet. A hidden infrastructure already waiting to be rented. That scale also tells us something uncomfortable about modern cybercrime. You do not always need to build your own stealth anymore. You can outsource it, buy access, buy camouflage, buy a route through somebody else's living room. And once that market exists, every neglected router becomes inventory. Every unpatched modem becomes shelf space. Every consumer who thinks it still works, so it's fine, becomes a possible silent participant in somebody else's fraud chain. There is a legal and policy shadow hanging over all of this too. End-of-life hardware stays online for years. Internet providers replace some of it. Manufacturers stop supporting some of it. Users rarely know what firmware they run. So where does responsibility end? At the manufacturer? At the ISP? At the buyer? At the criminal marketplace that turns weakness into product? I do not think this story supports an easy answer. The criminals made the choice. That part is clear, but the environment that made the scheme scalable was built from neglect, spread across millions of homes and businesses. Not one dramatic failure, a million quiet ones. By the end of the takedown, authorities had done more than seize infrastructure. They exposed a business model, one that thrives on the fact that ordinary residential traffic is trusted more than obvious criminal infrastructure. And that may be the most unsettling part of all. The safest looking signal in the room can be the one helping hide the crime. So, the next time you see a router blinking in the corner, it is worth remembering this case. In 2026, investigators said a criminal proxy network had turned thousands of those little boxes into rented disguises. No dramatic explosion, no warning siren, just blinking lights. And borrowed innocence. If true crime tech is your thing, subscribe and turn on notifications. Around here, we go past the headlines and into the documents, the mechanics, and the human cost behind the screen.